a calculated decision. As a freshman in college, Mark Jenkins felt anxious about passing calculus. He had assumed it would be just another math class, but he quickly realized he was mistaken. Just when he thought he had a handle on it, the midterm results proved otherwise. He barely scraped by. Desperate for help, he confided in his steady girlfriend, Millie. "I'm getting a tutor," he admitted. "That means we won't be spending as much time together." Millie frowned, frustration evident in her voice. "And what am I supposed to do while you're off studying?" "It's just until the end of the semester," he reassured her. She let out a sigh. "I don't like it, but I guess I can wait a month or so." Determined to improve his grades, Mark put out an ad for a tutor. A few days later, he received 2 responses. The first candidate was a burly man drenched in sweat, breathing heavily. The second was a striking redhead with dazzling green eyes. To his surprise, her name was Scarlett O'Hara, and, believe it or not, she was from Atlanta, Georgia. Mark barely hesitated before offering her the position. He was shaking her hand when Millie unexpectedly walked into the library's conference room, where the interviews were being held. Scarlett flashed a confident smile. "See you soon, Mark," she said, completely ignoring Millie as she turned and left. Millie's expression darkened. "Tell me you're not seriously considering her," she growled. "Baby, she's perfect," he defended. "She passed a midterm, is only taking 8 credits, and has free time that aligns exactly with mine." Millie folded her arms. "I saw the way she looked at you. No way am I letting her be your tutor." "You're being ridiculous," Mark shot back. "I only got 2 applications. The other guy smelled like a barnyard. I already told Scarlett she's hired." Millie's eyes narrowed. "Are you sure about this? Because if you go through with it, things between us will change. Do you have any idea how much this matters to me?" Mark pleaded. "This is the last math class I need before I can apply to the School of Civil Engineering. Please, honey." Her response was cold and firm. "No, take it or leave it. If she starts tutoring you tomorrow, we're done." Mark swallowed hard. "Deal." Without another word, Millie turned and walked away. That night, she ignored his texts, emails, and calls. After a restless night, he checked his ad again, hoping for another applicant. Nothing. "Shit," he muttered. "I can't mess up my scholarship over this." Millie would be furious, but he had no choice. He resumed his tutoring sessions with Scarlett, assuming his girlfriend would eventually cool down. One afternoon, as he was heading toward Millie's dorm to talk things out, he stopped in his tracks. She was getting into a car with another guy before they even pulled away. She turned to him, gripped his collar, and kissed him. Mark felt like he'd been sucker punched. Meanwhile, Millie had been walking with a classmate when she spotted Mark approaching. She knew he was still trying to convince her to accept the tutor. That wasn't happening. "Jeff, get in the car." "Now," she ordered. "What? Why?" "Just do it." Once he slid into the driver's seat, she hurried around to the passenger side. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Mark watching them. Without hesitation, she grabbed Jeff by the shirt and kissed him. After a few moments, she glanced back. Mark was gone. Jeff's hand slid toward her chest, but she slapped it away. "What do you take me for?" she snapped. Meanwhile, Scarlett was caught off guard when Mark handed her payment for 3 weeks of tutoring. "But you still have 2 more weeks before your final," she pointed out. "You've already helped me understand what I need to know," he said. "But I need to stop our sessions for personal reasons. If you ever need help again, I hope you'll reach out," she said sincerely. "Definitely," he nodded. Scarlett smiled. "I like you, Mark. A lot." She pulled him into a light hug and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek before walking away. From behind a nearby bookshelf, Millie smirked as she watched Scarlett leave, catching sight of a few stray tears on the redhead's cheeks. The next day, Millie waltzed into Mark's study room. "Thanks, sweetheart," she cooed. He barely looked up. He was still angry about the scene in the car. "Did you sleep with him?" She rolled her eyes. "Of course not. It was just a kiss." She lowered her voice. "I only love you, baby." "Go away," he muttered. "I have to study." She sighed but obeyed, letting the door close behind her. With nothing else to focus on, he threw himself into calculus. 2 weeks later, he didn't just pass his final. He scored among the highest in the class. It took time for Millie to fully regain Mark's trust, but she refused to risk losing him again. A few months later, they moved into an off-campus apartment together. Over Christmas break, he proposed. They married a month after graduation and celebrated with a beautiful honeymoon in Aruba. Life with Millie was wonderful, but deep down, Mark never forgot how close he'd come to losing his scholarship because of her ultimatum. They both landed high-paying jobs and, within a few years, were earning six figures. They bought a stunning 3-story house on a lake, just a short drive from work. 6 years into their marriage, Mark brought up the idea of starting a family, expecting Millie to be thrilled. Instead, she ignored the question. "Honey, I just got an assignment that requires me to travel to Europe 6 times a year for audits," she finally said. "Having kids isn't an option for the next few years." Mark's jaw tightened. "And how long does an audit last?" 1 to 2 weeks, she answered casually. His expression darkened. "So, let me get this straight. 2 weeks at a time, 6 times a year. That's 12 weeks a year you'll be in Europe." "Well, maybe less if we finish ahead of schedule," she said with a shrug. Mark narrowed his eyes. "We? You just said we? Who's we?" She hesitated before answering. "Randy Bannon. You met him at the Christmas party." Mark's blood ran cold. "Oh, yeah, that bastard who was practically grinding on you on the dance floor. The one you used to complain about because he wouldn't stop flirting or bringing you gifts. That was before. This is now," she said dismissively. "It's already set. My position has been filled, and Randy and I start audit training next week. We leave for Rome on Friday." Mark clenched his fists. "No, absolutely not." She raised a brow. "Excuse me?" His voice was eerily calm. "No, take it or leave it. If he or anyone else becomes your audit partner tomorrow, we're done." Millie paled. "But done is done," he interrupted. For the first time, she had nothing to say. And just like that, the ultimatum she had once given him came full circle. Take it or leave it. The final chapter. Millie's voice trembled. "Mark, if I refuse this project, I could lose my job. I don't want that." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "That's not my problem." Without another word, he turned and walked away. Panic surged through her as she chased after him. "Please, let's talk about this. Can't we figure something out?" Mark didn't stop. He packed a bag, got in his car, and drove straight to his brother Ted's place. For the entire weekend, he ignored her calls, messages, and emails. Frustrated but determined, she decided to move forward with her travel plans. He was overreacting, and she knew once the trip was over, he'd calm down. After all, they had built a life together. He wouldn't throw away 5 years of marriage over this. But she needed to be sure. So she did the only thing she could. She lied. A deceptive promise. Mark was sipping a cold beer on Ted's patio when the side gate creaked open. He turned to see Millie standing there in a form-fitting yellow sundress. "I told you it was over," he said flatly. She offered a hopeful smile. "I spoke to my boss. Randy won't be my audit partner anymore. Jessica Hollis is taking his place." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Come home, baby. Let me prove how much you mean to me." His jaw tightened. "No." Her smile faltered. "Why not? I gave you what you wanted." Mark's glare was ice cold. "This wasn't just about Randy. You planned this for weeks and only told me at the last minute. And don't pretend like we didn't discuss having kids when we bought our house." She forced herself to nod. "I know. That's why I told my boss I can only do a few trips. After that, they'll find someone else." Another lie. She figured once the assignment started, she could ease him into accepting it. But Mark saw right through her. "I'll think about it." Then he pointed to the gate. "Now leave." "Mark, go. Now." His sharp tone made her flinch. She hesitated, but, seeing no way to change his mind, finally turned and walked away. Ted stepped out onto the patio as soon as she was gone. "You saw that, right?" Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah, she lied. I know. Ted leaned against the railing. So, what's the plan? I'll wait until she leaves, Mark said, reaching for his laptop. Then I'll file for divorce. Ted smirked. Use my lawyer. She's adorable but ruthless. Mark chuckled. Then his expression turned serious. He opened Facebook and typed in a name he hadn't thought about in years. Let's see, how could I forget that? The truth unfolds. Monday morning, Mark's phone buzzed with a message from Millie. Mark, please come home. I'm leaving with Jessica on Friday. Let's spend at least one night together before I go. I'm giving you everything you wanted. What's the problem? He stared at the screen, then called her office. Hanger and Sons, how can I direct your call? Yes, I need to speak with Jessica Hollis. One moment, please. A pause. Oh, wait. She's on maternity leave. Mark's stomach tightened. Maternity leave? Yes, she had her baby last week. His grip on the phone tightened. Oh, right. That's wonderful. She already has 2 kids. Actually, who did you say you were again? Click. He ended the call. The last straw. On Wednesday, Millie showed up at Ted's place unannounced. Why are you being so difficult about this? She asked, exasperated. Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Remember when we were in college? You hated my tutor. Her eyes narrowed. Of course I do. She wanted to sleep with you. You didn't care that I needed to pass that class for my future. Instead, you pulled a stunt to make me jealous. She crossed her arms. I had no choice. You ignored my feelings and hired her anyway. You gave me an ultimatum back then. His voice hardened. Take it or leave it. She scoffed. Well, now it's my turn. If you get on that plane, we're done. She lifted her chin defiantly. This is my career, Mark. I'm going. I'll see you when I get back. She leaned in for a kiss, but he turned away. On Friday, he returned to their house. Her luggage was gone. With a deep breath, he got to work, removing her name from their joint accounts, canceling credit cards, and updating his life insurance. A wake-up call in Rome. Randy pulled Millie into his arms, nuzzling her neck. I still can't believe this happened. An image of Mark's furious face flashed through her mind. I made a mistake, she whispered. This can't happen again. Randy frowned. What? Why? I love my husband. Her voice cracked. When we get back, I'm quitting my job. His expression darkened. You're such a tease. Tension settled between them. The audit dragged on for 2 miserable weeks, with barely a word spoken between them. Every night, Millie called Mark, leaving messages he never returned. Each time, she cried herself to sleep. As the plane landed back home, she took a cab, opting not to ask Mark to pick her up. The final goodbye. When she arrived at the house, her key no longer worked. Confused, she rang the doorbell. A gust of wind blew her hair into her face as the door swung open. A woman with short red hair stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Behind her, another familiar face smirked. Jessica Hollis. Scarlett. Millie's breath hitched. What are you doing here? Scarlett's emerald eyes glinted. I live here now. She tilted her head mockingly. And you, my dear, have vanished just like the wind. Millie's face paled. Where's my husband? I need to see him. Jessica folded her arms. Just here to clear my name, Millie. Everyone at the office knows how you lied to your husband. Whatever. Millie snapped. This house is in my name, too. You can't just throw me out. Mark stepped past Scarlett, arms crossed over his chest. His expression was unreadable. You need a court order to set foot in this house again. Her eyes filled with tears. Mark, please. Let's talk. I'll resign on Monday. We can fix this. His lips curled into a humorless smile. No, we're done. He turned away and shut the door in her face. Millie stood motionless on the porch, staring at the closed door. Inside, Mark exhaled. She won't give up easily. Scarlett grinned. That's what we're here for. Jessica nodded. She won't see it coming. Mark chuckled. I hope not. Scarlett smirked. Me too. And with that, the past was finally behind him.